we get the session started. It's already 5 minutes past the hour, and I would like to get this session started. Let me start by saying it's my great pleasure to welcome you all to this webinar hosted by the African Union Development Agency, NEPAD. We are hosting this in partnership with our partners, the CGIR, particularly the AICCRA program, and the Forum for Agricultural Research, FARA. My name is Manyeru Mutamba. I work for the African Union Development Agency, NEPAD. I lead our work on food and nutrition security. And I'll be the moderator for this session. And I'm being supported with my colleague, Lizelle Fisher, who is actually going to come in a bit later with the panel discussions later in the session. Let me start by acknowledging the presence of distinguished senior officials from our member states and leaders of different institutions that are represented here today. We want to thank you for taking time to be with us and for honoring our invitation. Before I start, I want to request the representatives of our member states on the Zoom panel, if you could rename your your identity there, starting with your country. We want to be able to identify representatives of our member states. So if you could just take time, our IT colleagues will help you to do that. It's important for us to be able to recognize representatives of our member states. So if you could kindly rename your status on the Zoom channel. I also like to say that I want to encourage all the participants that are online to introduce yourself through the chat function so that we know who is here. Unfortunately, we are not able to go through everyone. So if you could just write your name, your organization that you represent, that will help us to understand, to know who is here. Please note that we have the English-French translation, and I'm sure our technical colleagues are working on that so that you're able to select the channel that you prefer for language. I should mention that online, we're expecting to have members of the technical working group. Essentially, this is a group that was pivotal, that contributed immensely during the preparation for the summit, particularly the Africa Fertilizer Soil Health Action Plan that will be discussed today. We also have invited our development partners. We have colleagues from the private sector. We have representatives of farmer organizations that are represented here. We even have farmers themselves that are going to speak later. We want to acknowledge all the partners that are here. We also have other partners from other organizations within the development sector that have interest in soils. But most importantly, we have invited representatives from our member states. To us, these are the most important stakeholders. And in all the work that we do, their interest and their priorities come above everything else that we do. We thank you for making time to be with us today, and we're delighted to have you for the next 90 minutes. As stated in the invitation, this is an information session that we have really put together, as part of our build up to the summit, the Africa Fertilizer and Soil Health Summit that will be held in Nairobi, Kenya, from the 7th of May to the 9th of May. So we want to encourage a deeper understanding of the issues that are on the table, some of the proposals that will be put in front of our heads of state during the meetings in Nairobi. But we also want to have a very quick rundown of some of the possible actions that we need to address as a continent and that are being addressed at the summit. So the spotlight is firmly on issues related to fertilizer and soil health, for the African continent. We face significant headways in increasing agricultural productivity in our croplands and in our rangelands, and the endeavor to end hunger end poverty as a continent, and also the adaptation of our food system. So the program today will take us through plans for the upcoming summit, including some of the issues that will be tabled to our heads of state at the summit. But we will also be in a position to touch on logistical and practical information around the summit, as we have some of the leading organizers, for the summit online for the meeting today. So they will be in a good position to answer any questions that you might have related to the summit. So the agenda today will start with opening remarks from my director, Director of Agriculture, Food Security at AUDA-NEPAD, Madam Estherine Fotabong. This will be followed by remarks from my colleague, Madam Panduleni Lagos. She's a Senior CADAP Advisor at AUC, and she's also centrally involved in the preparations for the summit. She'll give us a quick background to the summit, its objectives, and what we can expect to come out of the deliberations in Nairobi in the next month. She'll also be in a position to answer, critical questions that you might have there. After that, I will come in with a very quick presentation summarizing some of the key elements around, the Fertilizer and Soil Health Action Plan that is being put on the table for consideration by heads of states in Nairobi next month. After my presentation, we'll go straight to the panel discussion that will be moderated by my colleague, Dr. Lizelle Fisher. We will actually skip the Q&A session to the very end, so we'll do the Q&A session at the end of of the panel discussions. So at this point in time, I want to now call Director Estherine Fotabong to give her opening remarks and to officially welcome you to this session. So before, I can, Madam, you have the floor now. Please give us your opening remarks.
Thank you, Manyewu, for giving me the floor and for moderating this very important webinar. Distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I am indeed delighted to welcome you all to this webinar focusing on the African Fertilizer and Soil Health Summit. I think we have all been waiting for this, and we are happy that it will be happening soon. But before I get into the details of the webinar, let me take this opportunity to acknowledge the presence of our partners who are joining us today. I will join Manyewu as he already acknowledged some of you. I will really like to acknowledge and welcome the representatives of all our development partners, our knowledge partners, our implementing partners, our farmer institutions, colleagues from the private sector, and most important of all, the representative of our member states. We indeed thank you for making the time to be with us today. As many of you would know, the Fertilizer and Soil Health Summit is only days away. As I mentioned, this has been building up since last year, and we are happy to know that we will have this very important gathering in a couple of weeks' time. The summit comes at a time when Africa is facing significant food security challenges. Our heads of state have directed that we organize the summit to address key challenges we face as a continent in addressing food insecurity and poverty. The summit also comes at a time when we are revisiting CADAP Malabo framework, our continental blueprint for agricultural transformation through the post-Malabo agenda. We will have an opportunity to discuss more of this, I believe. The post-Malabo framework will guide our food system transformation agenda for the next 10 years, within, of course, the context of the implementation of Agenda 2063 Second 10-Year Implementation Plan. So this is such a pivotal moment in our developmental and food system agenda as a continent. And the discussion on soil health cannot come at a better time. Distinguished colleagues, despite sustained efforts over many decades, our food systems are still undermined by persistent low agricultural productivity. At the center of Africa's productivity crisis is the rapidly declining health of our soils. About 75%, and you all will know this even better than I do, of the continent's cultivated lands are degraded, resulting in poor health, poor yield responses, even when fertilizers are applied. So this conversation, and rightly so, moved from the narrow focus in Abuja to a broader focus on soil health. And I think we will have, as Manuel will present in the action plan, that this gives us enormous opportunities. If we do nothing, more than half of the continent's arable lands may become unusable in the next 2 decades. It is now clear that resilient and inclusive food systems in a changing climate are only achievable if we invest in restoring the health of our soils. Rebuilding this precious resource is now more important than ever before. Only a healthy soil can nourish healthy diets, healthy people, and a healthy planet. The upcoming African Fertilizer and Soil Health Summit demonstrates a growing appreciation by our leaders that our soils are the bedrock of our food systems. The summit will chart a roadmap for the restoration of soil health to drive sustainable food system transformation for the continent. Distinguished colleagues, AUD and NEPAD programs aim to implement key decisions by our member states. At the top of our agenda are efforts to ensure that all Africans have access to safe, nutritious, and affordable food produced sustainably by prosperous African farmers, including women farmers. As such, we will be at the forefront of implementing the continental resolutions that we expect to come out from the upcoming summit. Working with our member states and other stakeholders, we will champion the implementation of key policies and investment actions in line with the Fertilizer and Soil Health Action Plan. As we prepare for the summit, this webinar is an opportunity to build awareness, strengthen our understanding of key issues, and galvanize support from a broad range of stakeholders. Allow me to conclude by emphasizing that AUD and NEPAD remains unwavering in our commitment to achieving our continental goals on food and nutrition security and climate resilience. Working closely with our partners, we are ready to support our member states through impactful and sustainable programs. Before I end my remarks, I will want to again thank our development partners. And I would particularly like to thank the Norwegian government through a collaboration with NORAD and others who have continued to support our programs. We count on your support as we tackle the challenge of restoring the health of our soils and giving opportunities for our farmers to even be able to produce more and build on that productivity to gain access and economic benefits from their farming enterprises. I would like to thank you and wish all of us fruitful deliberations. Thank you very much. Back to you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you very much, Madam, for those encouraging words. I want to immediately follow those opening remarks with remarks from our sister organization, the African Union Commission, and my colleague, Madam Panduleni Lago, is going to give us the opening remarks on behalf of the AUC. Panduleni, I want to call you. Please, the floor is open. Please give us your remarks.
Thank you very much, moderator, and good morning, good afternoon, depending from where you are dialing in from. My name is Panduleni Elago. I sit at the African Union Commission headquarters in Addis Ababa. I would like to welcome you all, our member states present here today, our key partners, the members of the technical working group, who has been very, very instrumental in supporting both the African Union Commission as well as our agency, the development agency, that is here represented by Madame Fotabong, for all your support this far. Allow me, while my director sitting in Johannesburg has provided an overview of the context as to where we are on issues as they pertain to soil health and fertilizer, I have decided to simply pitch my remarks to give you some key necessary information to talk to where we are coming from up to where we are now, with only less than 2 weeks remaining to this back event, the Africa Fertilizer and Soil Health Summit, taking place in Nairobi, Kenya. Next slide, please. As some of you may be aware, the first fertilizer summit took place in 2006, which is well known as the Abuja Summit. And at that time, that summit focused on fertilizer use. One would perhaps even say, are we now having a second summit? Perhaps yes, perhaps not. But consequently, due to various global factors of which Madame Estherine has alluded to in her remarks, we know that issues of soil health cannot be left behind. It is on this purpose that already in 2021, the 4th ordinary session of our specialized technical committee within our African Union structure requested that the African Union Commission convene an Africa Fertilizer and Soil Health Summit between the year 2020-2023. Also, in 2022, the 40th ordinary session then endorsed the convening of the summit, and we are happy to indicate that the Republic of Kenya accepted to host the summit. Some of you may recall that our initial plan has been that the summit take place last year, but for many technical and logistical reasons, we had to postpone it to this year of 2024. A lot of work and the groundwork has already been done early last year. With the member states present here, you may recall that during the month of February and March, we were together online to put together some of the key documents that would inform the summit. Some of these were eventually endorsed by the ministers responsible for agriculture, rural development, water and environment at their meeting that was held in May 2023. It is these documents, making reference to the draft 10-year Fertilizer and Soil Health Action Plan, making reference to the Soil Initiative for Africa, but also making reference to the draft Nairobi Declaration that these ministers endorsed last year. As of this year, in February 2024, the heads of states and their governments endorsed the decision to then hold this summit on the date, as we all know, would be the 7th and the 9th of May in Nairobi, Kenya. What is the main overall objective of the summit? Again, I would like to make some key reference to Madam Fatobang's remarks, who highlighted really how the African continent has been doing in issues as they pertain to fertilizer and soil health. And it is for this purpose that we are hoping to bring together a huge number of key stakeholders that will sit together, discuss the role of fertilizers and soil health, so as to stimulate sustainable productivity growth on the African continent. And this will also be well stipulated in our draft Africa Fertilizer and Soil Health 10-year action plan, inclusive also of our Soil Initiative for Africa framework, which also has well been endorsed. Dear delegates and ladies and gentlemen, some of the key themes that will be discussed during the summit pertain to 8 different pillars, if I could put them that way. I may not need to go through all of them just to make good use of the time, but as you can see on the screen there, we have issues on financing of fertilizer, we have issues of policy frameworks. Of course, soil information system is one critical area that will be discussed. We have the importance and benefits of the landscape of our soils and water management, amongst many other. I am very sure that for those that will be present during the summit, you have already pitched to see as to where exactly your focus, and not only your focus, but most importantly also your area of expertise will be falling during those 3 days engagements, of which we are hoping that some of the partners also present here this afternoon on this webinar will be able to support AUC and AUDA-NEPAD to execute and implement and domesticate this key action plan post the summit. Just to take you through very quickly of how the program looks. It has been finalized. We are basically just waiting for our senior official to clear it so that it can be shared to everybody. But a snapshot of how the 3-day process would look like reads as follows. On the day 1, which will also cover much of the proceedings with the ministers responsible for agriculture, we will have key presentations that will talk to issues of Soil Initiative for Africa framework. We will have the overall presentation that will talk to the 10-year action plan. And again, I have to say many thanks for all of you, because these are documents that yourselves has supported in one way or the other through the existing technical working group that have put together these documents. We will also have some presentations that will talk to success stories and best practices at the member state level. And to be specific, we're looking forward to listen to success stories and practices from Kenya as well as Ethiopia. Statements from our ministers of agriculture from all our 55 member states, for those that will be present, will also be on that first day. Statements also from our partners, and Madam Fatobang have alluded to some of these partners, notably the Norwegian government, who has really supported both technically and financially to the success of this upcoming event. Also on day 1, we will be having various numbers of exhibitions and side events. If I could even talk to this, we will be having over 30 exhibitions, and we'll be having over 54 side events just over a period of 2 days. So it will be highly engaging, at the same time extensive. On day 2, ladies and gentlemen, we will have some interventions and statements from ministers, and these are now ministers of foreign affairs. Various parallel sessions will also be taking place, including a ministerial closed session. On this same day, we will also be providing the presentation on the declaration to these ministers responsible for foreign affairs. Lastly, on day 3, which will be the most key day amongst all the 3, is the presidential summit. All of you will be able to attend this presidential summit, which will be presented by the heads of states that will be there. Of course, on this day, the key outcome of all, which I could even say that is the key outcome also of our event, is the reading of the declaration, which currently is in a draft form. Next slide, please. Now, what are the key outcome of our summit? And I have talked to some of these. We are hoping that we will eventually, on the last day, have our Nairobi declaration on issues that pertain to fertilizer and soil health. We will have our 10-year action plan, again, on fertilizer and soil health. The Soil Initiative for Africa framework will also be endorsed. And lastly, which is very, 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 very key, we are also going to be presenting some mechanism to finance that action plan. And I would like to draw some attention to some of the partners present here today on this fourth bullet, as this is what will inform our implementation and domestication support of our member states from basically the month of June onwards. Next slide, please. I think which should be the last, exactly. So those are what we are expecting, ladies and gentlemen, over a period of 3 days, and would like to welcome you all to Nairobi, Kenya. Just in case perhaps there is some member states present here from the government of Kenya, again, we would want to say thank you for hosting us for this event. Over to you, moderator.
Thank you very much, Ms. Pandoleni, for that excellent presentation and summary of what the summit is about and what we can expect to come out of the summit. Because we are just behind time, I will really just go straight into my presentation that will cover the Africa Fertilizer and Soil Health Action Plan. Essentially, I would really summarize, this presentation. It's really the meat of the summit because it's going to be the roadmap in terms of how we will proceed, post-summit. So I'll give a very quick snapshot. So I will ask the IT colleagues to allow me to share my screen. Okay, IT, if you could allow me to share my screen.
Certainly, one moment, thank you. Yes, apologies for the wait, please proceed. Thank you.
Okay, I think it's coming. I think it's coming. Let me start by saying the action plan is a guiding document. It's a continental document, and it's meant to guide our member states in terms of how to proceed after the summit. So it's not meant to be prescriptive, and I should mention that it allows our member states to be able to tailor it to suit their local circumstances. So there's a lot of flexibility and there's a lot of realization that contexts are different across the continent, and there will be room for that tailoring to suit local conditions. And as we said earlier, our real task as AUDA-NEPAD would be to help guide member states in terms of navigating the commitments that they make at the continental level and domesticate some of these in a way that benefits them, in a way that addresses the key challenges that that they face. So I'm going to go through, the key elements of the action plan. I'm going to leave this document in the hands of participants at the end of the session for them to look at the details. Some of you might have already gone through the action plan itself. So essentially, I'll just start by saying, the action plan, outlines what are the key challenges that we face as a continent with respect to, agricultural productivity, soil health, and related challenges, including climate change. And essentially, how, global events have also, complicated the challenges that we face as a continent. We also have a coverage within the action plan of previous commitments that we've made as a continent with respect to fertilizer use. We also have a coverage of the progress to date and how that relates and how that translates to the broader objectives that we have as a continent with respect to food security and related matters. There's a coverage of the objective in terms of, what are the key areas of intervention, what are the results that are expected from, this action plan. There's also good coverage in terms of how do we move from very good plans to, a solid plan for implementation. What is the framework? What is the leadership structure? What is the coordination around implementation and support for member countries? Then lastly, there is also, coverage in terms of how do we track progress? How do we monitor, key elements of the action plan, including soil health itself? How do we design a robust M&E system and soil information systems that will allow us to be able to track progress and to be able to know what is happening to our soil? The challenge that we face as a continent, it's a topic that we have exhausted. The earlier remarks from director with respect to the welcoming remarks, went into some detail in terms of the productivity crisis that we face as a continent, the high rates of land degradation, the declining soil health as a real emergency that we face as a continent, and how these are being compounded by a worsening climate crisis. Essentially, this really just shows the urgency with which we need to act. And this is thoroughly dealt with within the action plan itself. And with respect to options on moving forward, how we actually embrace sustainable intensification, as a way of, building our soil health and increasing productivity of our systems. The costs around, accessing fertilizer and other soil, nutrient amendments, the logistical challenges in just accessing fertilizers, particularly for smallholder farmers, is a real challenge that has been put, in front of our heads of state through this action plan. Our high dependency as well with respect to imports. Most of these inputs are being imported, and this really exposes the continent to, all kinds of shocks that are related to global markets. With respect to previous commitments, previous speakers have already outlined the Abuja summit, which is really perhaps the first continental effort to address issues related to soil health and productivity. At that summit, the need to increase fertilizer use was really emphasized, and the need to reverse nutrient depletion and stimulate agricultural productivity growth, reducing food insecurity. At that time, the average use for fertilizer was around 8 kgs per hectare, and the target was to push it to 50, kgs per hectare. But so far, we've only really perhaps doubled, that fertilizer use to about 17 kgs, per hectare. With respect to productivity, disappointing, progress, I would say, in terms of really getting out of, this stubbornly low rates of productivity for the continent. The action plan itself recognizes, it's a realization that the multiple goals that we have set ourselves as a continent will really require sustained investments in restoring soil health and halting land degradation. We spoke earlier about the Soil Initiative for Africa, essentially something that started even before we started working on the action plan. This was meant to be the broad, overarching, long-term framework in terms of guiding Africa, in terms of where we want to go as a continent in addressing soil health, challenges. So the action plan, at the center of the action plan, and in terms of the thrust, the action plan really embraces the concept of integrated soil fertility management as a holistic approach to dealing with the issues that we face. We have also seen the embracing of the food systems approach. So a systems approach to how we deal with our challenges is at the center of how we do business with respect to soil health on the continent. It recognizes the critical role of both mineral and organic fertilizers. So each time you see fertilizers within the action plan, don't assume that it's just referring to mineral fertilizer. There's a realization that there's a huge role to play for organic, fertilizers as well. So both types of fertilizers have received adequate attention within the proposed action plan. So I can also add that as a departure from the previous attempts, the emphasis now is not only on increasing fertilizer use, it is also on increasing fertilizer use efficiency as a key parameter in terms of achieving the objectives that we want to achieve as a continent. So perhaps this demonstrates the need to embrace an ecosystem-wide and an ecosystem-wide approach with respect to understanding the implications beyond just our production systems, but to look at what's happening to the environment, including the climate as well. In terms of some of the key areas that have been emphasized from the action plan, the results framework is very clear. The vision is really around ending hunger, ending poverty, and having an inclusive food system. But with respect to how do we actually deliver that, this will be achieved through better policies, through better financing and market mechanisms, but also improving access and affordability to both organic and inorganic fertilizers. There's an emphasis on greater efficiency and resilience and sustainable use of fertilizers and other soil amendments. But the last pillar really talks about systemic capacity, improving systemic capacity for sustainable fertilizer use and related initiatives that would really be important in the delivery of the objectives that have been set forth. I'm not going to go into the details of what's there, but I'll really highlight in each of the areas what are some of the the key points of emphasis with respect to the thrust that we want our member states to consider. On the policy agenda, we want the action plan is actually emphasizing a continent-wide guidelines, for formulation and implementation, the harmonization to improve coherence and to promote regional and continental trade, support to smallholder farmers to access viable commodity markets and to support efficient fertilizer use, and for them to be equipped to invest in soil health. We also talk about localization policies to improve use of local foods as a way of building an economy around, the farming systems that we have on the continent. And we also emphasize policies that highlight and identify areas of high agricultural and ecological importance for tailored and sustainable, management of ecosystems. On finance and investment, some of the elements on finance have already been highlighted, particularly the Africa Fertilizer and Financing Mechanisms, which is meant really to drive efficient use of organic and inorganic fertilizers and soil health interventions. Incentives for private sectors, for private sector players to invest in low carbon fertilizer production, in research, in trade, but also in farmer support services, the de-risking of farmer investments in soil health. These are some of the, the areas that have been highlighted with respect to finance-related, action. On efficiency, on greater efficiency and sustainable use actions, it's an area that is really important that we've really gone to some detail in emphasizing the potential for the continent to promote integrated soil fertility management practices, context-specific use of fertilizers. We talk about the 4 R's, having the right nutrient sources, at the right, applied at the right rate and applied at the right time and in the right places. So these are typical approaches that have really been highlighted in the action plan. But there's also emphasis in improving affordability and access to key products, like, for example, lining products. These are really key to unlocking the potential of fertilizer use. So they are central to our endeavor to achieve fertilizer use efficiency. Monitoring soil health and developing a soil health information system really at the center of what the action plan is emphasizing and is providing a roadmap for our member states, to follow in terms of addressing the challenges that we face. Other actions proposed in this area also talk about integrated soil and water management and planning across landscapes, across watersheds, smart irrigation, context-specific and sustainable ag practices that include increasing biomass, and coupled with crop and animal production. With respect to strengthening systemic capacities, some of the actions that are in the action plan talk about really strengthening capacity in soil health and sustainable, soil management at various levels, at the national level, the national research system, the extension system, the public-private partnerships, essentially to really advance quality support and quality advisory services, particularly for smallholder farmers that have been lacking in this area for far too long, and also to have a thorough review and upgrade of tertiary programs, tertiary training programs on soil health, on soil science and agronomy, to include sustainable soil and efficient fertilizer use as a key part, as a core part of those curriculums. But we also realize the potential of informal and in-service training on sustainable soil management is key to really changing, the capacity landscape that we have within our member states. So there's even more detail in that regard, but I will really skip to the implementation part of the action plan. Essentially, the action plan goes into some detail in terms of how the implementation is envisaged, particularly with the leadership of the AUC and AUDA-NEPAD, who will be at the center, of coordinating the various, partners that we have, supporting our member states. And essentially, as we mentioned in the beginning, this is our primary role, our primary reason for existing, to support our member states to be able to domesticate the continental agreements, that they come up with. So we are going to be deeply engaged with our partners. We are going to be at the center of resource mobilization, to support that effort, and particularly to support implementation at country level. The issue of monitoring, evaluation, and accountability, and learning across from country to country will be a big part of our endeavor with respect to the support that we're going to provide. You probably would have already seen in the action plan, there is a detailed plan in terms of how to come up with an M&E system that integrates with an existing system that has been developed through the CADAP framework, and many of you would know that it's called the biannual review process. So we are looking at how to develop indicators that are specific to soil health that will be a part of how we track progress in that regard. But we will also have a broader tracking mechanism to look at our commitments in policy, in finance, in capacity building, and other areas, but also to really deepen our understanding of what are those metrics that we can use for tracking soil health itself. It's not clearly apparent that we already have some of those, so they will need particular attention, particularly working with our technical and knowledge partners and think tanks to really think around, how do we come up with robust, indicators for tracking progress with respect to soil health. In terms of implementation, we envisage a two-phase, approach where we'll have a preparatory 18-month period post-summit where there will be a lot of work to really establish and define and understand coordination mechanisms, define the issues, look at modalities for supporting our member states, proofing and piloting some of the promising interventions, and really the final planning, resource mobilization, and engagement with our partners that we really need, to get to if we are going to be successful in delivering the ambitious targets that we expect to come from the summit. The final phase is really the main implementation phase that will actually take us to the 10-year mark in our implementation. So this is the real implementation phase now, where we support member states to implement their national action plans. We're supporting all the other the private sector to deliver on the objectives and the targets, that will have been set in the action plan. So this is a really quick summary of what you can expect in the action plan for those who have not engaged with it yet. But definitely these are still proposals that are being put in front of our member states. So this is not written in stone yet. It's still proposals that are to be considered at the summit. And we are very confident that at the end of the summit, we will have an endorsed action plan that we can now use as the guide for continental action with respect to restoring the health of our soils. Let me stop here. I think we are running against time. I will stop here, and I will not ask for the question and answer session now. So we want to go straight to the panel discussion. I know that colleagues in the panel will also clarify some of the issues that I mentioned about, and they will go to some detail in terms of also sharing their perspectives with respect to what they already know that's already in the action plan, but also to the broader understanding of issues on soil health, and perhaps some of the the elements of interventions that are on the table to assist us in addressing this matter. Let me stop there. At this point, I want to ask my colleague, Dr. Lizelle Fisher, to moderate the discussions within the panel. You have a panel of distinguished colleagues. You have practitioners, you've got farmers, farmer organization representatives that are really at the key of the matter that we are talking about today. So over to you, Lizelle, and thank you for your kind, allowing us to have you on the panel. Thank you. Please go ahead, Lizelle.
Thank you very much, Manyewa, and good morning, good afternoon to all the participants. I'll also ask all the panelists to please switch on your videos. I will briefly introduce you in the order that I'm going to ask you questions, so please take note of that order, and especially Professor Wole Fatumbi, you will be last, so please listen to the contributions from all the other speakers so you can answer the question that comes to you last. So I will start with Dr. Shemi Zingo, who's the Director of Research and Development for the African Plant Nutrition Institute. I will then move to Ms. Phoebe Mwangangi, who is a farmer in Makueni County in Kenya. Then on to Mr. Stephen Muchiri, who is the CEO of the Eastern Africa Farmers Federation. Fourthly, we have Dr. Dawit Solomon, who is based at the International Livestock Research Institute, or ILRI, in Ethiopia, and also the regional program leader for East and Southern Africa in the accelerating impacts of CGI, or climate research for Africa. And then lastly, we have Professor Wole Fatumbi, who is the Director for Research and Innovation at the Forum for Agricultural Research in Africa, or FARA. And I neglected to introduce myself. My name is Liesl Visser. I'm a soil scientist based in South Africa. I work as an independent science policy consultant, and I've had the privilege to work especially with Professor Wole Fatumbi and also with Shemi and others in the process of preparing for the summit. So it's really an exciting time for all of us that the summit is only 2 weeks away. So without further ado, because we are late on time, I will aim to ask at least one question of each of the panelists. So Shemi, coming to you first. We had a very brief overview of the summit process and what it will look like and the action plan, and a lot of mention of soil health that came up in addition to fertilizer following the Abuja 2006 summit. So can you just give us a brief overview of what do we actually mean with soil health? What does that look like in practice, and how does it relate to efficient fertilizer use? Over to you, Shemi.
Yeah, thank you very much, Lisa, for the introduction, and I greatly appreciate the opportunity to be part of this panel discussion that is setting the stage for the important deliberation that will happen at the summit in under 2 weeks. Yeah, just to address your question, Lizelle, agriculture has traditionally treated soils as a means to the end, with a key function that was narrowly viewed as supporting crop production. And that resulted in neglect of the broader sustainability of soil management, because the key drive then was to support improved crop production, but without paying attention to the other sustainable interventions needed to improve, the overall long-term health of the soils. So soil health is a very important cornerstone of the summit, and the emerging thinking is a perspective of a holistic view of soils, not just as a means to the end to produce our crops, but that soils themselves should require the right investments for their sustainable management. And the soil health perspective views soils as a vital living ecosystem that not only support plant growth and yields, but also ensures the health and development of animals, humans, and it also goes to the functions of soil water quality management. These are ecosystem services that enabled by source beyond crop production, and then also supporting climate change adaptation and mitigation. And there are other functions also related to agrobiodiversity preservation also that are integrated in soil health. And soil health is intricately linked to human health, because beyond crop production, soils provide support for other environmental functions that directly affect human health. So soil health is taking center stage at the summit, And this view sets a right framework that ensures that investments in soils goes beyond fertilizer, but address the broader management interventions that are needed for improving the overall chemical, physical, and biological properties of the soils. But I just wanted to also underscore that, you know, in the context of Africa, soil health is not possible to manage sustainably without addition of fertilizer, because the underuse of fertilizers result in nutrient mining that depletes soil nutrients. So fertilizer is not mutually exclusive from soil health. It actually is a key ingredient for enabling soil health, but then fertilizer must be managed in an appropriate way. For our nutrient strategy, for example, is a key concept that ensures fertilizers are managed in a sustainable way to enable fertilizer to contribute to soil health sustainability. And then in turn, soil health is an essential factor in improving fertilizer use efficiency, because fertilizer use efficiency is very low in degraded soils, and improved soil health enables farmers to use fertilizers in a more agronomically and economically viable way. So the action plan of the Fertilizer in Africa Soil Health Summit underscores some of the key policy requirements that enable farmers to access the right resources, including fertilizers and complementary organic resources, liming, and also it covers water aspects that are needed for us to sustainably manage out, and provides a clear entry point for governments to invest in the right policies that enable sustainable soil health management. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jamie. I see Wole has also commented, reiterating that you said the soil is a living ecosystem and it needs to be healthy to be functional, just as humans need to. And you mentioned depleting the nutrients, and just like humans need to be fed, so plants need to be fed through the soil as well. And definitely noting your comment that soil health and fertilizer use is not mutually exclusive on the African continent. So thank you very much for that. And from there, Phoebe, I want to come to you as a farmer. We heard in the introductory section that how important you as farmer and farmers are in terms of implementing what has been put together at the continental level through the Soil Initiative for Africa and the Africa Fertilizer and Soil Health Action Plan. And I actually saw a question from Ermias Betamariam as well, who I know is from AICCRA, which speaks to the question I want to ask. And he was saying, is there any acknowledgement and valuing local knowledge and wisdom regarding soil health? So in relation to that, my question to you, Phoebe, is, having listened to all of this, what is there that you hear that you feel you've heard before at the continental level? And what is there that you as a farmer feel are your important needs in terms of looking after your soil, and what are your needs in terms of improving your soil health or productivity that you would like to be considered in implementation after the summit next week? Over to you, please, Phoebe. Phoebe, you're muted, so we don't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we hear you now.
Okay, thank you for having me in this conversation about soil health. I'm happy to learn that something is coming up, which will discuss more about soil health and fertilizers for us smallholder farmers. I've learned that there's a lot of high package of information and action plan which has been placed, which will help us as smallholder farmers. As I have heard from Dr. Manyao, he has said that they're trying to come up with a guidance on document on farmers, and they're not only considering the organic, they're also considering the organic fertilizers. Both fertilizers are being put into consideration. This is a plus for us smallholder farmers, because at times when we say fertilizers generally, most of the smallholder farmers may think the fertilizer is the one which is commercially prepared, and they would want to go for it, and they think it's the one which will improve the soil. But we know even these ones which are not mineral or commercially prepared fertilizers will also help the farmer. We have needs as farmers and smallholder farmers. We would wish that this action plan will also, in terms of advisory service, fertilizer use, the small improve the soils as it is supposed to happen. We may not be able to get good health if we are not having good advisory services. I also think for sustainable management of the soil, the smallholder farmer would also wish to be guided on fertilizer use more than just the name of the fertilizer, that you need this fertilizer for this and you need that fertilizer for the other. I think the smallholder farmer needs more guidance in a language he or she can understand better, so that we use the fertilizers for the right purpose at the right time, and we don't poison the soil other than enriching the soil. So it is good that we have these farmer advisories and guidances for proper use of the fertilizers. The other thing is that we request that in this forum that we will have a way of controlling the manufacturing of fertilizers. We have some farmers suffering because of buying fake fertilizers. So we hope such an event, if it comes up, and a punishment will be properly meted on such people who are misusing the smallholder farmer. Finally, I would also want to appreciate what was said by Bwana Manyao, that we want effective, efficient use of fertilizers. And this one can only be achieved if these farmers are well advised in a language they can properly understand. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Phoebe, for that very clear and very well articulated response. And what I like about it is that you know very clearly what it is that the needs are. And I'm sure, given more time, you can add a much longer list about the needs. But it's really heartening to hear the mention of the combination of not only mineral but also organic fertilizers, the need for advisory services, especially in local languages, and any kind of advice, and definitely the request for ensuring that quality fertilizers are delivered, and along with the appropriate advice. So we certainly take note of all of those. Thank you very much. So Mr. Stephen Muchiri. Stephen, I'm coming to you next. As CEO of the East African Farmers Federation, having heard what Phoebe has said and working very closely with farmers, and a criticism or comment that I've heard many times when we talk about the action plan is, where is the voice of farmers, or where is the need? How is the needs of farmers articulated? And that it often appears that developing processes like these are more supply based. So what is the role of farmer federations and farmer unions such as yours in ensuring that we have a very clear and direct link with the smallholder farmers, because it is a very large proportion of the African population? And how can we work together to ensure that we really look at a needs-based implementation process after the summit? Over to you, Stephen.
Yes, thank you, moderator. And I want to thank the previous speakers, especially Phoebe, for being very clear about what should actually happen. I think before I go to the role, there's something I wanted to just mention about this meeting and the fertilizer space in general. As it would be a bit controversial. I think from where we sit, and this is really our view, fertilizer was never meant to be the main source of nutrition for any crops. Okay, fertilizer was only supposed to be a corrective action when you're dealing with soil nutrition or crop nutrition. And I think the point where we started having a challenge is when we started looking at agriculture as independent commodities. So you're running a livestock enterprise separately from a crop enterprise, different crop enterprises. And we stopped looking at how we can actually integrate, our agriculture systems. As we are talking about a food system, cyclic agriculture. Well, the moment we stopped doing that, that's when we started having these kind of challenges we're having as we speak. In the region where I come from, in East Africa, our soils are poor in terms of organic matter. The organic carbon in our soils is actually very low. And I think for me, what is actually important with respect to this summit is actually looking at what alternatives do we have to enhance our soil organic matter? Because I think that for me is the actual critical problem we have with our soils. We cannot deal with productivity if we look at fertilizers alone. So that's for me is an issue. The second thing is that, and I think Phoebe talked about it, you're coming to Kenya when we have a big challenge of fake fertilizer. There's a big scandal in the country. I think there'll be a lot of discussion around how fertilizer is actually traded, distributed, issues of standards, issues of quality, and so forth. And I think beyond what Phoebe said, and I think this is a challenge you've actually seen in the fertilizer space, is the cost of fertilizer, issues of access, issues of tailor-made fertilizer. As we speak, we still have straight fertilizers as compared to access to blended fertilizers. As we speak, we have subsidy programs in the continent and especially Kenya, which are really a drop in the ocean that are not properly managed. So the real intention of those programs is actually never realized, as it were. We sit in the Africa Fertilizer Financing Mechanism. And as we speak, and we thought that this would be a mechanism that would actually help, in terms of financing fertilizer for better access for smallholder farmers. I think as of now, there are only 2 pilots, one in Tanzania, I think, and one in Nigeria. So really, we have huge programs, huge initiatives that look very big in the meetings, but they don't reach Phoebe. They don't reach the small farmer. We just speak about them in conferences, but we don't see the impact as it was. So in my view, I think we should be looking at very holistic, very integrated approaches to ensure that we are dealing with the soil health issue in a broader sense. So there's no one silver bullet in terms of response. Number 2, we should be looking at scaling up all kinds of approaches that, in our view, enhance the soil organic matter in the continent. So what is the role of the Farmer Federation? I think what I've talked about is what the association should actually do. How do we ensure that, for example, the programs that we are proposing to our heads of state are actually implemented? How do we ensure that this information is actually reaching Phoebe so she's able to follow up with the local government where she's actually situated? How are we able to lobby to ensure that the cost of fertilizer actually goes down, that you don't have fake fertilizer in the market, that you have tailor-made production of fertilizer, that we are enhancing capacity even in terms of soil testing, because I think she said it very well. We have challenges of agriculture advisory when it comes to crop nutrition, and that is very true. A lot of the labs that are actually doing soil testing either don't have sufficient facilities, but they don't have even the capacity to recommend a soil fertilizer program. So we need to look at how we have more students also getting into soil science, understanding soil nutrition, crop nutrition, because I think that's the biggest challenge we actually have when it comes to issues of productivity in the continent. So our role has always been providing information, lobbying, advocacy. There are many practices that farmers are doing out there that are actually successful, and we are involved in documenting all these processes and putting them on the table. We have a huge outreach. So we're able to reach many actors, not only government, but also we're able to engage with the private sector. We have partnerships with private sector. We have partnerships with banks to support in terms of financing. We have partnerships with insurance companies. We have partnerships with the research institutions. We sit on the boards of some of the regional research organizations. So we are basically a bridge through which, the farmers are able to speak to all these actors and be able then to also present feedback to the farmers. And our structure is such that being a regional network, we have national associations, which then have sub-national associations. And I believe FIBI should be part of probably a sub-national organization that is part of a national system that then connects with us at the East Africa region. And we have a Pan-African organization, which then helps us connect with the Africa Union. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stephen, for that very comprehensive response. And I appreciate that you shared your own thoughts before answering the direct question. So clearly the issue of quality of fertilizers, financing, access to knowledge, and so on coming up strongly. Also the importance of soil organic matter, which directly relates to biomass production, which relates back to what Shami was saying, that we also need fertilizers to produce the biomass, to increase the organic matter. And I see that Wole has also been responding in terms of some of your points. So I think he might also address some points in terms of capacities and scaling and so on. So, but I want to use your one point in terms of holistic management and integrated management of soil resources as a perfect segue to Dr. Dawit Solomon. Dawit, since you are with ILRI and in the livestock sector, both in Ethiopia and also at the regional level, my question to you is, how do you see the role of the livestock industry, both in terms of depending on soil health and contributing to soil health, not only in terms of livestock, but also in crop production, keeping in mind that Manyewo mentioned in his presentation of the action plan that there is priority in terms of integrated soil health and water management in the landscape, which in African agriculture especially looks at integration between croplands, grasslands, and livestock, and even forests. So yeah, happy to hear your perspective from the livestock sector, and also what can be achieved at the regional level in terms of harnessing and improving the integration between livestock and crop production. Over to you, Dawit. Dawit, you're muted.
Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, the moderator, for the question. I think so I just returned, let's say, from actually visiting a livestock farm where circularity was clearly, highlighted. I think, it is often, if you look at the livestock sector and also its role on soil health, I think they're really, integrally, I would say interconnected. So the sector, if you look at it more from as a source of, we have talked a lot about soil organic matter here, and if I look at the livestock sector as a source of organic matter, what has been currently being tried as part of a circular economy is that the byproduct of the livestock sector, which is manure, often is linked as either a direct source for organic matter, both by separating the solid side and the liquid side, or also going through some processes which convert the manure into a more stable source of carbon by subjecting it into pyrolysis process, and whereby researchers are producing, let's say, black carbon out of it. The whole reason for that is that the fact that this the soil health, one can become a direct beneficiary of the organic matter through a direct application of organic source of plant nutrients through manure and also the liquid part, but also beneficiary of the black carbon, which has a much larger life span or ability to stay within the soil and can be considered as a very important source of carbon for carbon sequestration. So the sector, one can be a beneficial source of both nitrogen, phosphorus, and sulfur, which are essential nutrients for crop production, but also at the same time, so through manure and management of the liquid waste, but also at the same time can be, a very good source if it is linked with some aspects of circular economy and become a source of a more, stable form of carbon. And in this case, I think the research shows that a more pyrolytic carbon, which is subjected to a pyrolysis process, might be something which stays within the soil system for a longer period of time. And as such, can become, a source of carbon, which both improves or organic matter, which improves soil health, provides, essential plant nutrients, but also contributes to basically to carbon sequestration. When I'm looking at the African health and soil health and African fertilizer and soil health, proposed action plans, there is an effort to link soil health which is considered as critical to addressing climate change and realizing Africa's agricultural potential. So the one thing here, when we see livestock, often livestock is considered as, is on the other side of climate change, but if you really integrate it very well and manage it sustainably and link it to the circular economy aspect, then I think it can be a very good source of plant nutrients and also a very good source of a stable form of carbon. So I think, that nexus between livestock and soil health is there. And if you add the climate dimension to that, it can be, a very good partner for the proposed, action plan by the soil health, the African Fertilizer and Soil Health Summit and some of the proposed action plans. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dawit. That was very clear, and also a very clear link with the need for increased organic matter in African agriculture that was also highlighted by Stephen. And yeah, very good to see all the progress in terms of livestock research and the livestock waste as potential input for cropland agriculture. So we only have about 8 minutes left in the session. So as the final participant in our panelist, I'm going to Prof. Wole Fatunbi. So Wole, if you can in 5 minutes, just give us a brief overview, because we've heard mostly about the Fertilizer and Soil Health Action Plan. But as Pandoleni also mentioned, there's also the Soil Initiative for Africa long-term framework. So can you please give us just a quick overview of how many of the issues raised by our panelists are also incorporated in the long-term consideration of soil health in Africa, and how are these concerns also considered in the post-summit implementation process through developing more detailed documentation and so on. Over to you, Wole, for the final word.
Thank you very much, Lisa, and participants. I've been enjoying the chats, and a lot of useful information coming up there. Our partners at AUDA-NEPAD, I will be glad if you put this up and you give us a summary at the end of the day. Let me say that bulk of the issues that are raised in the presentation of the highly knowledgeable panelists here and the presenters, they all find themselves one way or the other in the Soil Initiative for Africa and the African Fertilizer Soil Action Plan. In addition to the presentation given by Madam Pandoleni, Soil Initiative for Africa is a long-term framework for halting soil degradation in Africa and coming up with soil management system for the continent itself. And we believe strongly that this is what we need. Now, the African Fertilizer and Soil Health Action Plan, it represents a 10 years implementation of all the issues that are indicated in the SIA framework. In other words, the action plan goes for the first 10 years and we implement it. We review it, we learn, we bring new issue on board, and possibly another action plan will come up for the next 10 years. If you have ever had access to the these two instruments, you will see that the issues of integrated soil health, and water management is prominent. Secondly, the issue of human, institutional, and social capital. The third one is the need for data and information for effective planning, monitoring, and use of our soil, and also the need for policy, legal, and regulatory framework. Now, all these issues in SIA, you find them as the key outcomes for the African Fertilizer and Soil Health Action Plan. Now, when you look at these big instruments, when you look at these two big instruments and the implicit issues, it addresses all issues. But when you pick it, possibly you may not understand the details. And so effort is going on to develop what we call companion documents. The companion document pick each issue, break it down into bits and pieces such that it helps the member state to be able to domesticate the action plan and the Soil Initiative for African Framework. Often these issues are big and broad, and they encapsulate every other thing that we have mentioned here. But possibly when you have access to the action plan, and the action plan is being, this companion document is being developed now and is going to be released as international public good for us to domesticate. And I also am aware that efforts are going on from the different technical organization, policy organization, to engage member country at different levels to develop their own implementation strategy based on this. But African Union wants this to be coordinated. And just like Panduleni said, immediately after the summit, then African Union is going to be calling a convening for us to move it. Now, let me just close on some part of the discussion we've had already that touches my mind. I believe that the reason why our soil is degrading very fast is because every one of us over decades have a bit of erroneous opinion on the capacity of our soil. But those that are technically sound, they understand that African soil is the oldest soil in the world. It is because of its old age and continuous use over time, it is now inherently low in fertility. Soil scientists, we agree that the cation exchange capacity is low. The African soil is made up of low activity clay minerals. And that is why you see that the colloidal property, including organic matter, is very small. You know, those type of soil require effective management strategy. And that's why people bought into fertilizer, and without adequate knowledge, we are all disadvantaged with fertilizer. The farmer just mentioned it. Why? And I want to tell you that what you need to optimize fertilizer use is appropriate knowledge, number one, of your whole soil, of the nature of the fertilizer. Otherwise, when you use it and use blanket application method, you know, it's like pouring salt inside a sieve and opening tap on it. It washes it down. Even phosphorus gets fixed, and you will start complaining that, oh, the fertilizer they gave me is fake. It may not be fake. It is because you do not have adequate knowledge. And soil, and the action plan is focusing on that, getting farmers to see. The issue of soil information system is also becoming very important. And the Soil Initiative for Africa and the Action Plan is thinking strongly on establishing continental soil information system. We are thinking of an information system that the farmers can use, that will use the best method in ICT development, artificial intelligence, but we need basic soil information that will help you possibly pick your phone, get the GPS coordinate of your farm, and it can give you the current status of the soil. It can even provide advisory services of some sort on the crop to grow and the fertilizer to use. This looks like a pipe dream, but I see it as doable. And so I want to stimulate interest of the broad stakeholder group and support for this unprecedented political will we are getting from our leaders to make sure that our productive capacity, soil, is first. Give it your support, let the member country key into it, and we implement it with adequate coordination, and perfectly, we are getting there as a continent. Let me just stop there, and Lisa, back to you.
Thank you very much, Wale. Passionate and enthusiastic as always, and a perfect summary, I think, to and also call to action in terms of ensuring that our productive capacity is enhanced, and that yes, we look at the quality issues for fertilizers, for example, but also understand that we can improve the efficiency of fertilizers that are of the right standard and quality and the right type for the right crops, and that this is indeed a very long-term process, not only 10 years, but up to 2063. So I'm going to hand back to the original moderator, Dr. Manyewo Mutamba, and I'll just leave you with a last thought. If we had time, this last question I would have asked everyone, all the panelists, and I'm actually going to ask this to our participants as well, in case any of you have a chance to put it in the chat. If you think ahead 10 years from now to 2034, what would be the one thing that you would like to see that would show you that the Africa Fertilizer and Soil Health Action Plan has been successfully implemented? I would really welcome your thoughts on that. And with that, Manyewo, back over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lizelle, for that excellent panel discussion, and the panelists as well for excellent inputs, clear messaging from Phoebe, who is busy farming somewhere in Kenya. Very clear messages in terms of what we need to really focus on. You know, I really want to thank the panel for great job in terms of bringing many of the key issues that we have on the table. I really appreciate your contribution. We are almost out of time, but I want to give a few minutes to allow some of our participants to ask one or two burning questions. I particularly want to start with the representative from Botswana, who has indicated that they want to make interventions. I want to check if they are still online. If they can please make their intervention before we give an opportunity for any other burning questions that we can accommodate in the time available. The representative from Botswana, are you on the line? Please go ahead and make your interventions if you're still with us. Please check if they are able to make their interventions. Please, the IT, you can open for them to be able to make intervention. If they are not online, I would like to check again if there's any other participant who would like to make interventions at this point or ask a burning question. We are right at the top of the time we have. So please just raise your question, and we'll try and get some of the panelists and some of the participants to respond to any question. I don't see any hands. I don't see
the
any
participants can raise their hand with a button on their name they want to, and I can allow them to talk.
Okay,
yes, thank you,
I
Edward.
can see Edward. Yeah, I think I can see Edward with a hand up. Please go ahead, Edward.
Yeah, thanks very much for a good discussion and realizing that the organic input is a major aspect of the equation, and looking at what we have and the quantity and quantum that we need to complement the inorganic fertilizer. How do we move forward? Because I've worked within this sector for quite some time now, and realizing that getting the quantity of the organic input and the quality of it to complement the inorganic fertilizer is a key challenge. I don't know your thoughts on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Edward, for that very clear and very pertinent question, which is really at the center of how we really address one of the key challenges, the soil organic carbon issue that has been thoroughly also alluded to by the panel. I want to check if there's any other question? Any other hands that you can see? The technical team, you can also assist if there are any other hands so that we can get a few questions.
We've allowed the colleagues from Botswana to talk. They are welcome to.
The representative from Botswana, please go ahead with your intervention. Please make sure they have access to the mic.
Yes, they can talk. I think it's Chebukani. If you can talk. So if you're able to contribute, please feel free.
Yeah, please go ahead. Okay, while they are getting ready, maybe we can see if there's anyone else. But otherwise, I want to go to Wole or David. You can maybe we start with David, then Wole, you might also jump in on that question from Edward.
Sure. So thank you very much, and I'll try to be very, very brief. And Edward, I think it's great that you raised this question, because there are successful, practices, both I think on which we have been working together, both in Ghana, Sierra Leone, and that part of West Africa. So in terms of organic matter, I think the first and the most important thing is a clear biomass resource assessment at the country level is necessary if you wanted to work in the areas of knowing your organic resources. The second and the most important point is, once you do a thorough biomass resource assessment across the various sources of biomass, you need to follow that with trade-off analysis. Every organic matter which is available is not available to be converted into a fertilizer. I think trade-off analysis is there. And the third and the last point when it comes to that is really you need to develop a system whereby this organic matter can be effectively converted, and if possible, and the technologies are being developed now, effectively pelletized, so that it becomes a very clean, easy to handle, and easy to apply product. I think that's the first, that's to your first question. And then the second there, and I just wanted to clearly highlight, is I think this also, the process here and the action plan need to also focus on circularity. The question that came to me was, how do you link livestock with soil health, energy, and climate change? So I think, that circularity aspect of using organic matter, which is coming from the livestock sector, converting it partly to energy, and also the remaining going into the soil health part, and clearly addressing the issues for carbon sequestration. So I think we need to think in some areas outside of the box, but we need to conduct biomass resource assessment and trade-off analysis. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Wole, I see you're shaking your head. You probably want to say something in 1, 2, 3 minutes, 2 seconds.
In fact, yeah, that's exactly, because this is an area that the Soil Initiative for Africa and the Action Plan is given priority effort into. Whatever we do, if we are unable to manage organic and mineral fertilizer amendment together, it will still be hitting ground. I want to say that it will be good if we can find access to the recent EC study on available resources for manufacturing organic fertilizer in Africa. I sat in the steering committee of that study, and that's a very rich resource that should inform what we do. But I also understand that in the last 2 decades, we've been working on organomineral fertilizer, thinking about recycling an organic component of the domestic waste and all those things. I agree with the good colleague from ILRI, the need for us to optimize organic material that we get from the livestock industry. And I think farmers are doing a lot around that already. All we need to do is to find a way to optimize it. the continent needs itself to have policy and technical action to drive this in a coherent way. And I will stop by saying that what we need to do to bring to scale all the knowledge and the technical practices that will ensure this is to begin to communicate in such a way that we will foster a change in mindset of all the soil users. If we can get it right from that angle, then possibly we begin to move in the right direction. Back to you, Maya.
Thank you, Wole. Thank you so much. I know you can go on and on, but let me go to Steve. It looks like you might be the last last intervention. I don't see any other hands.
I actually want to give a very technical response to the question asked. And I like what Dr. Dawit actually said. I think the challenge we have, in addition to raising the organic matter of our soils, is a technical know-how around crop nutrition and soil analysis. You see, every crop has a crop nutritional requirement. So you need technical expertise to match that requirement vis-a-vis what is the soil test results. Because when you look at some of the fertilizer programs that are actually proposed, and I still want to say that soil fertilizers are supposed to be corrective inputs, there's a mismatch, with respect to that particular intervention with respect to technical capacity. And it's unfortunate that even a lot of universities, in as much as they have the expertise, don't have that technical expertise to actually give advisory on the right fertilizer program and applications. Every crop at every stage has a different crop nutrition requirement. Once we have put in organic matter in our soils, we need now to test the soil so that you actually know what was inherent in the soil, what has actually been brought in by the organic matter, and then what are we then correcting in terms of what the plant is actually going to require. So at the point when we actually removing the plant off the soil, we actually know what has actually remained in the soil. So that is what is actually completely missing with that respect. And I think something Phoebe said, the challenge has been that, and Dr. Dawit talked about it, the problem has been that our livestock sector has been depreciating over time. Livestock was always our source of manure, of organic matter. And what has happened is that on the crop side, we've been pulling out the crops and feeding these animals because animal feed is very expensive. So you can actually see what the problem is. So the moment then we're able to ensure that we are feeding our animals well, then we don't have to remove that crop residue from the farm. It's actually then decomposed in the soil. And at the point when we actually want to plant, we do a soil test. Yeah. So I think we have to go back to basics. This is farming that we did back in the day. We need to go back there. But what I don't want us to have a conversation around is to promote fertilizer. In my view, fertilizer is as the only, as a silver bullet with respect to increasing productivity. We can see it in Kenya. Kenya is a country that has uses most fertilizer in East Africa, but we are the ones who are importing food from Uganda, and Uganda doesn't use as much fertilizer. So I think we need to be open when we're actually having this conversation. So then the interests don't drive the conversation. I think these discussions on agroecology, regenerative agriculture, I think are important in as far as this conversation is actually concerned. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve, for some frank inputs there, which I think are really key to informing our conversations going forward. I don't see any other hands, but I can assure you that we have really had a very rich conversation and key points that have been made, some concrete suggestions in terms of issues that we can take forward. I should say this is really the beginning of the conversation that we think will have to continue for a long time to come as we address these matters beyond the summit. I personally was really enriched with the contributions from the panelists and many others in terms of, for example, the role of livestock, the circularity, the central role of organic nutrient sources, essentially issues that are already part of the conversation and are already emphasized in the action plan. But it's so clear that we really have to take this forward, and we need to deepen our our capacities in the various elements, in the various areas, issues around analysis, understanding exactly what's in the soil and how the crop nutrition requirements are going to be met. It's a wide range of issues that we really need to get on top of. And I know that we are out of time. I want to really thank you for your indulgence because we've run over, but I think we've really had an exciting discussion, which I'm very keen to take forward at the summit, beyond the summit, as a basis in terms of how we move forward, in terms of how we support our member states, how we deepen the capacities that we need, how we create the infrastructure that we need, the systems that we need, the soil information systems that should be at the center of informing our decision making. So it has really been a great exchange of ideas. And for me, this is just the beginning of many to come. I really want to take this opportunity to now close the discussion and thank you, starting with our panelists, some of our presenters, for taking time and for allowing us to go slightly above the allocated time. I look forward to interacting with many of you at the summit. I know you're already making plans for the summit. I should let you know that AUDA-NEPAD is co-convening, side events at the summit. We will be in touch with the details of those side events, and we look forward to your participation at those side events and many others that are planned at the summit. Beyond the summit, we obviously want to be at the center of conversations around soil health, and we will notify you of our plans going forward. Like we said in the beginning, we're really committed to supporting member states, to working with partners, across the board to ensure that we really strengthen, the support that we give to our governments, to the private sector, to the farmers themselves, to deal with this issue and to really drive towards the objectives we've set for ourselves as a continent. Let me take this opportunity now to really just wrap up and thank you again for the participation, the active participation, and for most of you for staying at the end of this session. We really value your contribution, and we thank you for honoring our invitation. And we look forward to interacting with you again very soon, I'm sure, through the various other means and wherever possible with face-to-face interaction. Thank you again, and again to our panelists for the great job, for the great insights, and we look forward to seeing you again in other meetings and hopefully at the summit as well. Thank you very much. And with that, I want to call the end of this meeting, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you very much, and bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.